Well, I'm Simon, I'm with Privacy International, hello, and I guess what I want to do is just tell the story of privacy and why it's important. And the story begins around about 3,000–4,000 years ago, when cultures started to develop ways of understanding, ways of communicating, ways of socializing. And an important balance was struck between the need to give information, to build respect, to build trust, and to preserve information, to protect the family, to protect your integrity and your reputation. And in the thousands of years since then, we've codified this as laws, as principles, as conventions across the world. We know it as privacy. There are subsets such as data protection, the protection of information. And you can break this right, as it is now, into hundreds and hundreds of different topic areas, from communications privacy, bodily privacy, the privacy of your home and your family, your correspondence, the right to be free from surveillance, the right to expect the government will do the right thing with your information. And this is transmogrified over all these years into a movement. A political movement, a social, cultural movement, and we're starting to find a balance, a uniformity across the world. So there are people out there, particularly large companies and some governments, who would say, oh, most of the world doesn't understand privacy. And of course, this is ridiculous. Every country has its understanding of privacy. It might not express it the same way as another country, even the neighboring country. But everybody knows when their privacy has been invaded. For some countries, people are concerned about their communications, because that represents government power and personal right. For others, it's the home, and they're concerned about the police having access to your post, for example, your letters. So the way we're trying to develop this, and the way Privacy International has been developing over the past 20 years, is to try and reach an understanding amongst advocates and campaigners across the world, so that we're all speaking in the same voice, with the same ideals, but more importantly, the same messages. So a bit like the parables, Road to Damascus or whatever, we're trying to speak with stories that people can understand. And unlike 20 years ago, we can now learn from each other. And tactically, we can learn from each other too. So a successful campaign in one country can be transmitted very rapidly to strategies in other countries. And where we fail, we're totally open with our partners that we failed, and those mistakes won't be replicated. So that's the basis. Privacy is a right. There are huge forces lined against it, but there are massive forces supporting it, and those forces represent, as I say, thousands of years of evolution of human society. We must never forget that. We should always be alert. The government, of course, sees that it has an interest in either protecting itself or protecting the public interest.
But can't they do both?
They can do both, and that's one of the big fights that we're engaged in. Responsible public management, responsible lawmaking that doesn't violate the individual rights. So, for example, when a government says we need blanket power, let's take a look at Uganda, for example. We're currently in communication with the Parliament in Uganda. The government wants to introduce a telephone, a wiretap surveillance law. But it wants to do it without any process, without any protections, where a minister can just sign a warrant. Now, as Gus and I have been talking about, even in the United Kingdom, which has probably the worst record in the world, as the Western world, of authorising telecommunications interception, a politician can sign a warrant, but there is oversight, there is a process, the bureaucracy is involved. So weak as it is, there are protections. So we, for example, would say to Uganda, and are saying to Uganda, this is your opportunity to actually build an accountable structure so that people can have trust in the government, that there are always people watching to make sure the right thing is done. That, I think, is a crucial thing for everybody. Don't just buy the argument that something is being done for security or for public health or for public moral. Always make sure the structure is in place, the oversight is in place, that there is a proper process, that it is lawful, and that it is independently scrutinised. If you can do that, then lawmaking itself becomes more accountable and the political process is strengthened. And a lot of this is to do with transparency, of course.
Right.
This is why privacy being very much at the centre of all other rights, we would say that one of our strongest partners is the right to know.
Right.
Once you can open that up in a country, you consequently strengthen the right to privacy, because you clip the wings of government in breaching privacy.
Okay.
So you see, these partner rights, as we might call it, these associative rights, are really important. We've been discussing over the last few days here in Bangkok. We don't see privacy in isolation. We see it very much as allied to all of the universal rights.
Okay.